Good morning. Don Palayo here. It is Wednesday, Thursday, July 10th. um, Don Palayo checking in with you guys again. My days are getting a little crossed up. Uh, but what I wanted to talk about today is I feel like the things are really kind of coming to a head in a lot of different ways with the economy, with the world's on edge right now. Seeing a lot of countries, are stockpiling things, feeling like some bad times are coming ahead of us. I don't know if the United States government is doing that or not, but if not, they should start. Um, and I think being prepared, but there's a lot of preparedness channels out here. I've watched a few channels. There's Magic Prepper, and there's Pinball Preparedness, and there's a few others out there that I'll watch as well. But I just think it's important that we're all keeping our families and our homes prepared for any coming dark times. Perhaps I was talking to one of my friends. He served in the Marines for a little bit, and I think we're both kind of in agreement that the direction we're heading right now, um, people are hurting more economically here in the United States than they have in a long time. People are not used to it. And I think whenever you get a time like this where people are struggling more, where people are hurting more, you're going to have more crime, you're going to have more violence. Um, so a few things I would just recommend for everyone, in terms of taking care of your families, making sure that I would say that probably the first thing that you would want to do is have an emergency supply of water and food in your home. We've seen a lot of problems here lately with weather events and things like that. Your best course of action, is if you can to remain in place, to remain in your homes, and if there is an emergency where maybe you can't get out for a while, things that happen, you'll have some emergency food and water in your home. Sometimes water gets cut off or water becomes undrinkable, but there's times where the water may not be you're not able to drink the water out of your tap. There may be problems. So having an emergency supply of water, at least maybe a couple of weeks worth of water, and having some emergency food in the house would help get through some sort of short-term crisis. Um, you may also want to have they have different water filters and water purification tablets that you can purchase. Um, I wouldn't go. I don't think you have to have a year supply or anything, but I mean, if having maybe you have enough water on hand for a couple of weeks. But then beyond that, maybe you'll need to boil water. Maybe you use water purification tablets and filters to maybe get you through, a month or two. I feel like if we can make it through that first month, we should be. Most people should be okay in most circumstances. Um, Second is you need to think of some ways of, and there's ideas out there on how to secure your home. I feel like my home for the most part is fairly secure. The only drawback to my house is I do have these doors over here, the sliding glass doors, which if someone wanted to get in, they could smash through those through that glass. um, I need to come up with some ideas about that, but that's really the one entry point into my house that I'm kind of concerned about. If someone wanted to come in, now I have a home alarm. I do have firearms in my home. If someone broke in, that I could put up a defense, you know. But that would also be a good idea for people if you're comfortable with it having at least maybe a shotgun or a revolver, something like that at home, where if someone does try to come in, you can at least fire a warning shot, or even with the shotgun, all you have to do is just click. You know, if you have the type of shotgun where you're racking the shotgun, that sound a lot of times will be enough to get people to go running away. so so shotguns, you know, are really good for home defense. Just that sound of a shotgun being racked usually will be enough to get the intruders to run away. Um, I think that as we're moving forward, it's going to become more important to to secure our homes, you know, have stronger bolt locks on the doors, secure any kind of glass doors. And I'm gonna have, you know, I'm sure, I know there are ways to do that. I'm gonna look for some ways online in terms of I've seen videos out there talking about securing your home and all. So those will be some things I'm going to be doing, working on for myself. Um, I feel like my neighborhood is in a fairly safe area because I live kind of in a cluster home community. I don't have any adjoining walls with other homes, but all the homes in my community are pretty close together, and that offers a little bit of safety. Having neighbors so close, I feel like criminals are not going to be as likely to try something in a community like this. Whereas they might feel safer with one isolated home by itself, you know. Um, the next thing is I would have they call it a bug out bag. If you've never heard that term before, it's just a let's just say you have you know, something pops up and you have to flee. You have to leave your home in a hurry. You can grab your bug out bag, which will have enough food and water and basic necessities that you'll need for maybe 3 days, maybe even up to a week worth of stuff. And that I have a backpack used for hiking and camping, and that's what I'm going to be using as my bug out bag. It's already got some of the basic necessities in it. I'm actually working on building that out right now. Maybe I'll do another video about that in the near future. But you should have some like protein bars. Maybe you have some trail mix in there. You know, for food, have a few bottles of water. You know, maybe have a couple of liters of water in there. Um, at the bare minimum, you know. And there's a lot of things that can go into, you know, that you might have in that pack, but it's basically just for basic survival over a few days, at max like a week. So that wouldn't be nearly enough water for a week, but maybe you carry some emergency water in your car, or you know, something like that. You just have to keep it out of the light, out of the sunlight. But um I just really have a concern about how things are going right now, mainly because I hear how many people out here are really struggling right now. And I remember back in 2008, you know, we were, you know, people were struggling in 2008 after the collapse, but that was more of a home and stock market deal. It felt like most people, their personal economies. I mean, there was some struggling. I lost my job during that period. I went to work. I was working for a bank, Wachovia, which I was working in their risk management department there, and Wells Fargo bought Wachovia, and they kept us on for several weeks, but then eventually Wells Fargo let my entire department go. I remember that morning. I had an exam that morning. I was in the process of taking the CPA exam, and I took one of the CPA exams in the morning, and I went into work late that day, and I got there and nobody was there, and I was like, I'm looking around like, where is everybody? And I found my manager. She was there, and she told me that Wells Fargo had let us all go. They did give us several weeks severance pay, to help give me enough time to find another job. And sometimes when you're in a situation like that, you just have to kind of take the any job that you can find. And I had two college degrees. I had degrees in finance and accounting. I was working on my CPA exam, and I found a job working for Rent-A-Center, Rent-A-Center, moving furniture, taking furniture to people's homes and that sort of thing. And I did that for probably 3, 4, 5 months, something like that. Not a long time. I wasn't there very long. I was able to finally find another job. It may have been longer. It may have been up to 6 months, 6 or 8 months, maybe. I can't remember. It's such a long time ago. Um, but I actually enjoyed that job. Funny enough, you get some physical activity. You're out moving around on a truck. Um, I did get a lot of overtime. The hourly rate wasn't what I was used to making, but because I got a lot of overtime working at Rent-A-Center, and my pay was fairly comparable. Not maybe a little bit less than what I've been making, but overall it wasn't too bad. It got me through until I found my next job after that. I went to work for an insurance company. And I was with them for several years. But I I'm really at a point where I feel like there's a more of a struggle now than there was, I think, even in 2008. I think more people are struggling and hurting right now than they were in 2008. I feel like basic household budgets are more strained now than they were in 2008. And when you get a period like that, this is where people start breaking. I think I think we've already seen some uptick in violence and things like that, and crime. And I think there's people become kind of desperate. So it's important for all of us to be, have some emergency supplies at home, food, water. Um, right now it's July, but it won't be too long. It'll be fall and winter. It probably wouldn't be a bad idea to have some warm weather clothing in the home, have extra blankets just in case something happens. It wouldn't take a lot. It doesn't take much to knock out power. So you may want to make sure you have enough blankets and warm clothing and things like that, just to get through a period if you happen to lose power for more than a couple of days. Um, Longest I ever went without power, I was living in Spain back in the 1990s, and they had a real heavy period with a lot of rain, some bad storms. And the apartment I was living in, we lost power for a week. We were out of power for a week, and that was a long time to be out of power. And fortunately, we were able to go and live with a couple of other friends. We went and stayed with them until our power came back. But all the food that we had in the fridge spoiled, and all of that. Things were a little different in Spain. They don't have the big refrigerators like we have here. So people in Spain typically go and buy fresh food every couple of days. So the food that we had wasn't that much, and we were able to replace it fairly easily. But here, you have a freezer, or you have stocked with meat or something like that, and something like that happens. Hopefully, you'll have like some ice, that you can stack in that freezer to try to keep your meat from going bad. But anyway, I just think it's a good idea. I always talk about, having an emergency fund in cash, having, building investments, building wealth. but also you need to have some supplies, some hard assets at home. You probably want to have some emergency cash at home, just enough to get you through maybe a week or so. Um, some people might recommend more than that, but I feel like if you can get through have enough to get through a solid week, maybe 2 weeks, we can get through just about anything in that amount of time, at least here. It's, unless it's some major catastrophe. Um, anyway, things to think about. I think that we're moving into a kind of a hard time right now. I think Americans, we've been a little bit spoiled the last maybe 40 years. I think we've been a little bit spoiled here in the United States. We've had it pretty good here for the most part. Sure, we've had a few hiccups. Um, over the last 40 years, things that, I mean, we had the stock market crash in 87. We had, in 2001, of course, we had the 9/11 attacks. We had the big housing, crisis in 2007, 2008, 2009. And then we had COVID more recently. So we've had some hiccups, but overall, I would say the last 40 years have been pretty good here in the United States. Um, but you go back like 100 years, you go back to like the 1920s and 30s, and people especially the 30s, people had it was a struggle, with the Great Depression and everything. So I think that we may be getting back to a more of a historical norm, and we're just going to have to kind of adjust to a harder lifestyle. We're not going to have maybe the excess that we've had the last 40 years. So things to think about. Really, be conscientious with your spending. You know, buying things that you need, maybe not necessarily want. I think all that's becoming very important now. Anyway, be you might want to go out there on YouTube. There's a lot of good channels out there in terms of preparedness. I would just take a look at some of those channels and follow some of the material. It gives you some ideas on things that you should be doing to get yourself ready for things. Um, I would be looking for ways that you might be able to live out of your car for a while, have some extra supplies maybe in your car, um, just to make it through maybe a longer stretch of time where where you need to leave your home. Especially if you live in the cities. If you live inside of a major city, you might want to be prepared to evacuate that city. Things like that. Anyway, I'm gonna get going. I'm gonna get ready for my work day. I've got some things to take care of this morning, and we're gonna make the most of it. You guys stay safe, and just keep your nose to the grind, and put away some extra cash, put away some extra food and water, and we'll make it through this. I do feel like we go through hard times, but we always come out of them, and there'll be better days ahead at some point. Anyway, this is Don Palayo checking out.